All right, and we are live.
Regionfree makes my nipples hard. So let's go.
We will return to London after midnight on WTSF.
Yeah, I know. I've been thinking about it a lot. I just wanted to hear your voice. You know what today is, right? I can't stop thinking about it. About what happened. And to his face. It was just a prank. What do you mean for that to happen? It's been 5 years.
On an unseasonably warm March day, at least where I am, we're back in the Region-Free house, and we have a show for you today. We're going to span all the way from New York City to the Carpathian Mountains, and we're going to take a healthy stop at erasing the Scream series from motion picture history. How are you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. We're actually joined by a New Yorker tonight.
How could we not?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. I've lived in New York for 8 years now, so yeah, that's been my life. Going on
8
the train.
years. You
I
qualify.
I would pay money to hear Stone recite the David Berkowitz letter to the police that starts with "Hello from the gutters of NYC."
Oh shit! Yeah.
I always thought it was kind of disturbing that Berkowitz was capable of just as good poetry as some of the great poets of our era.
Son of Sam. Yeah, insane.
Absolutely. Now a pastor doing the Lord's work. So there you go.
Oh, okay.
Arguably for a telephone, the right to use the telephone. But who am I to say what's in someone's heart? I guess killing people with 44 Magnum, you can turn that around, right?
Yeah, it's natural progression to preacher. I mean,
You guys excited about anything? You seen anything? You want to scream about anything before we start with topics?
Well, last movie I saw in the theater was Dune Part 2, and it's worth every penny to see on the big screen, whether you see it in IMAX or whatnot. Look, I saw Dune Part 1. I talked about it on Region-Free when that came out 2.5 years ago, and despite the fact I found it very industrial, I was on board with it. And of course, I had never seen the Lynch movie before, but Dune Part 2 does what all great follow-ups and sequels do, like Empire Strikes Back and movies like that. I mean, just it expands the story. It lets the characters grow. And I had a blast with it. I mean, great cast, great direction. Denis Villeneuve is really, really making an impression. And he's already finished writing Dune 3. So we'll see that in a couple of years and probably even more because of all the books that are out there.
So, you bring up something really interesting, which is I haven't seen either Dune film, but well, I saw the one from the 80s.
Lynch.
Well, how can I not, right? But But you bring up something really important to sequels that is often not done right, which is that characters, especially the main characters, should evolve in sequels. And too often they're really afraid to let characters change from what they were in the first film. Even series where we like the characters a lot and don't want them to change because we like what they are. And I'm not even talking in the horror genre. You could take the Lethal Weapon movies; it'll work for. Those characters do not change, and therefore they don't need 5 movies. So it's good to hear that you're saying that Dune 2 lets characters breathe and lets them be changed by events. That's important.
Yeah. Are you a fan of the sci-fi miniseries, which are not typical Sci-Fi Channel fare?
I've not seen them, to be perfectly honest. I mean, are they the most faithful, you think, to the books, or?
They're reasonably faithful, certainly more than the David Lynch film. So,
but I haven't an oddity on its own merits, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Lynch film is not generally a favorite of fans of the novel or the novels.
But it's also just as much a Dino De Laurentiis thing as it is, and Dino De Laurentiis of the King Kong Lives era.
Yes. Oh my God.
So it was always a weird pairing.
Yeah.
I'm glad it exists, though, right? Like,
oh yeah, yeah.
In the era of summer blockbusters that look and feel interchangeable, there was this big summer movie that you'll never mistake with anything else ever in your life. So I'm glad it's out there. Is it perfect? No. Is it in the top quartile or even top half of Lynch films? No. But you know what? He got to work with a lot of money and a scale that we never got to see from him ever again. So glad it's out there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad it is, and I'm really glad that Dune 2 is kicking ass at the box office, because right now we should be rooting for everything. And you know, unfortunately, I haven't seen it yet because I had to see a really bad teddy bear movie. But
I will never see that. I'll see the Dune films. I won't see the teddy bear movie. That's not going to happen.
It's not even a lot of the teddy bear, to be honest.
Teddy bear movies.
Yeah, imaginary kind of. It's not the only bear movie, though. I'm going to have Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, too.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I'll never see that either. this is a show about not going to see movies. That's what this has become.
It's kind of that. Yeah, I suppose it is. But I am seeing a lot. I'm seeing Love Lies Bleeding tomorrow, which I have high hopes
Very
for.
exciting. Very exciting.
Looks really, really good. Hopefully it'll live up to that trailer. It's a good couple months for horror movies. We have Immaculate coming out with the new It girl, Sydney Sweeney. We've got Late Night with the Devil, which I'm very excited about. That's been compared to Ghost Watch, so excited to check that out. And there's a lot of good stuff coming, hopefully. So, but Bloom is having a bad year so far with Night Swim and now Imaginary. 2 insanely bad films. So
speaking of bad films, I had to double check. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey won Worst Picture at the Razzies, and it was tied with Exorcist Believer for the most wins with 5.
Well, wait a second. Exorcist Believer is a far worse film, though.
Yes, I believe it.
You get what you're at least promised with Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. You know what I mean? Like, you're not expectations are about there for that.
Sure.
And Exorcist is fucking Exorcist, and you shit that out on a plate. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, like, Blood and Honey was like someone saying, "Hey, how do you feel about root canal?" And you were like, "Yeah, do I have to?" And they're like, "Yeah, you kind of do." So you go in and you get the root canal. You call something the Exorcist, you're saying, "Hey, how would you like some birthday cake?" And someone shoves monkey piss in your face.
Yeah,
that's pretty much what happened. You know, it's funny. Dirk in the comments is saying Blumhouse is done in my reality. I uploaded a video almost 5 years ago saying Blum was done. You can point to one thing, one oddity out there that you really like or whatever, but we're never gonna get something like The Hunt ever again from them. That's really clear. They're just not capable.
Yeah, I mean, anything good. Like, there's a movie called The Passenger out there from Bloom that is shockingly good. But it's like even when they get that one good one, it's just thrown on VOD for nobody to really see.
Because going to make room for the Killer Teddy Bear movie. That's not a Killer Teddy Bear movie.
Yeah, I guess so.
Did I just have a stroke, or is Dan quiet?
Yeah, he went quiet.
Dan, we cannot hear you.
We can't hear you.
I'm going to start generating subtitles of my own choosing if you don't get the sound back on.
Well, I haven't seen Blood and Honey, but as somebody who grew up watching like the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh with the all that stuff on Disney, I don't know how I would react to that. The cat. What?
And the European cat breaks the silence.
Exactly. Oh, are we back? Uh-oh.
This could be an intimate show.
He'll
find his way back.
You want to go camping, Lorne?
Not unless I'm going to be paid a lot of money.
Okay.
No, it's funny because when I look at what's playing every week, and I look religiously because I think I'm foolish enough to think that I'm going to be really excited about something. Often I look at what's the big Hollywood thing that's out, and I have zero interest. And I used to go anyway.
Mm-hmm.
How about now?
Oh, loud and clear.
Okay, I don't know what that was. Mute button wasn't pressed, so
I think the killer telekinetic teddy bear wanted your voice to be silenced. It was the Blum Army.
The power of Christ compels you to turn your mic back on.
That movie couldn't even. But so I like everyone else this week. I turned over to see what was out, what was where, and I'm lucky. I live in a place where there's a lot of different movie houses that play pretty much everything in release within an hour of me. It's very rare that I can't see a film, and I'm very, very, very grateful for that. But it was looking over things. I ended up seeing an Indian film, as I do most times, to be honest, because what happens is I know that at least, even if it's a train wreck, it'll be interesting. And that's not true of most domestic product at this point. So for me, last weekend, I saw a film called Shaitan, which is literally just translates to Satan. Which the best way I could describe it is, imagine if in in Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, when Reverend Kame walks up to the Freeling's grandmother's house, Joe Beth Williams lets him in. So it's sort of a supernatural home invasion film in which a character with seeming powers takes control of a teenage girl inside her family's house and just makes her do things, some very bad things. And it's a pretty exceptional film. It's my favorite thing so far this year. You're still early, and I'm hoping something far surpasses it because that means good stuff is coming. But intense, maybe overlong, but I was just marinating in the world and I was cool with it. And it did a bunch of things that are surprising even by any standard, let alone Hindi cinema. If Shaitan is playing near you, go see it. It's pretty great. And the final act will surprise the living hell out of you. Because it's not the place where like an M. Night Shyamalan film would have gone. Which is the little twitch in the back of your head goes, oh, they better not find some cop out, and they do the opposite, which is they go to the most extreme version of what's happening instead, and that's kind of deliriously wonderful. If you like films, I don't want to give it away. There's a film that I would compare it with if you like it. But I would say if you like those satanic panic films, especially British ones of the 70s, you're going to be right at home.
I'm excited to check that one out. I really am. I've heard from a few people now that it's excellent. So hopefully I'll get to check it out soon. If not in theaters, Netflix or something. I would.
Netflix is its streaming partner, so
Okay.
I imagine in about 30 days you're going to get access to it with subs.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, you said you had an intermission too, which was
There was a
interesting.
so they all Indian films have intermissions.
Yeah.
But what's interesting in America is the intermission title comes up and then it immediately goes on and plays the rest of the movie. Typically,
Yeah.
that's what happens. This is the first time where the intermission hit and there was a 10-minute counter. There was a real 10-minute intermission in the middle of the film, letting people go to the bathroom and get their stuff done, which I appreciated. It's a longer film, although it doesn't feel long. I've never seen that in my life. I've only experienced the modern film going, and it was cool. I would love to see all that return though, rather than the freaking ads before a movie. If you could get rid of the Coke ad and give me a short cartoon or a short film, I'll take a newsreel for Christ's sake. Anything, get us back to a place where I want to show up on time for my movie, because as it is now, I just get shoveled more shit than I do at home if I'm watching television, which is never, because I hate being shoveled shit.
I think more people need to be open to short form content too. I would love a short film before a movie. Just coming off of the Oscar coverage, I mean, some of the live action shorts, the short animated things were amazing. And I know nobody really goes out of their way to watch those usually, but I think that's something I'd like to see return. Because like you said, AMC, it's like over 20 minutes now of ads, and not trailers. Sometimes there's a lot of ads. So
and frankly, what I really hate about it is them dressing it up as a pre-show. Listen, Maria Menounos, you seem like a very nice woman with an annoying laugh, but I don't really want you to just interspace like, I don't know, 1-minute interviews with people or trivia with stars I don't recognize with ads for insurance companies. It's we know what you're doing. Just stop. It's obnoxious.
Yeah. More Nicole Kidman.
Less, no, not in my world. A whole lot less Nicole Kidman.
This is why I largely go to Alamo Drafthouse, because you get the trailers, you get the one little ad, and then they tell you to shut the fuck up when you're in the theater, shut your phone off, and then you watch the movie. I mean, I'm very, very close. I have only about 21 episodes left of Mystery Science Theater 3000. And among those episodes, some of the best ones are the ones with shorts in the beginning. You know, I mean, I don't understand why they can't bring back the cartoons like with the Roger Rabbit cartoons or like what Lauren said, newsreels. This was all prevalent in the 40s. And it just doesn't happen anymore, which, I mean, why not have a nostalgic experience like that again? It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, rather than us feel like we are on the end of a contract, right? The theaters are making money on our back.
Exactly.
They came to watch the Captain America movie, so we're going to sell them like camper insurance. I mean, that's where we're at, and it's really obnoxious. I would actually pay more for my ticket if you could get rid of that. So like just like Netflix adding like cheaper rates to get their service without, I'd go the opposite direction. You get rid of the existing ads, I will pay more for a ticket. I really will.
Yeah.
It's the worst thing about movie going, and I love movie going. I will never give up on the theater. It's part of my DNA. But Jesus Christ, can we have you treat us with a little bit of respect? Thanks. Appreciate it.
It's funny, Todd, a couple times he's gone in and it's like, oh, are you sure your movie's about to start? And he's like, no, it's not. It's like, I've got over 20 minutes before it starts. It's like, I'm good.
Yeah, definitely. And also, one last thing before we start topics, really, I have this issue with the homogenized Hollywood has had a weird effect, which is that I'm now seeing trailers for films that make no sense in front of the feature. Mm-hmm. Because everything thinks it's a 4-post tentpole film. I'm sorry. I came here to see a little imported horror film from India. There is no way I need to see a trailer for like Barbie. it doesn't make any sense. Like, the person who shows up for that is not going to go to see the other. So just stop. Like, again, it feels like they made a contract. We will show your trailer before every movie if you pay us. So now that's what happens. In the past, it was always, and if you were a horror fan in the 80s or 90s, you remember going to the theater and seeing almost exclusively horror trailers before your horror movie.
Yeah.
Because they were like most chances for him to come back. And that was in the old days when you had to physically put together a reel for showings and you were adding the trailers manually. So the theaters were doing what was smart for them business-wise on their local level, not some grand, like, multinational level. Ridiculous.
Yeah.
So do you guys want me to put the shotgun down and get off my porch?
Shoot away.
No, I mean we're full in agreement with you. I think. I mean, it's just, yeah. I don't know what else is there to say about it.
All right, let's take our first stop on the tour. One of the big pieces of nostalgia of the VHS era was being introduced to different places that as a kid I could not go. Even though one of them was fairly close and one that showed up a lot in the type of entertainment I wanted to see. And that was grimy, ugly New York City from the 1970s through the early 80s. Yeah. Certainly by the early mid-90s and the Giuliani era, New York became a different place and a place I could explore completely differently. And I'm grateful for that. However, the beauty of the grime from the safety of my VCR was intoxicating. And so many genre films of that period presented New York in its worst possible light for all of our enjoyment. Whether we're talking New York Ripper or we're talking about Basket Case or whether we're talking about Nightmare on a Damaged Brain or whatever. Whenever I got to see these metropolitan areas in full decay mode, it set the perfect mood for a certain type of horror entertainment. I really should say exploitation entertainment, right? But it really was a magical time for cinema, even if it was a horrible time if you were living in those cities. Yeah. Stone, you've been living in New York for 8 years, and you've seen the city kind of go in some directions, right?
In some ways. I mean, I'm very much I'm very agoraphobic, so I don't go out as often as
I hate spiders too, man.
He hates spiders. Well, welcome to the stream. This is awesome.
Yeah, lost track of time. Sorry about that, gentlemen and audience.
That's okay. We bitched about commercials and
I feel that. I feel.
Well, I was just going to say, look, I would love to go back to the times of, like, you know, Taxi Driver and Maniac and the New York Ripper and all, you know, when New York was this like filthy labyrinth where it's almost like there were killers and rapists around every corner. It almost seems like with some of these films that came out. But I mean, I wanted to set aside two films that from my own collection that I feel represents, you know, some of the finest of New York City horror. And I want to start out with Brian De Palma's Dress to Kill, which has that very, very famous Museum of Modern Art sequence. And just, the whole train sequence as well, when Nancy Allen is trying to get away from the killer and everything. Of course, Dress to Kill, for those who haven't seen it, has a passing resemblance to Psycho. But I also think it's very much its own beast. I mean, De Palma, he loved aping Hitchcock. But the thing is, and even though he got a lot of shit for it, I mean, the truth of the matter is he was pretty much the only one doing it, and he was doing it really, really well. I mean, and I think Dress to Kill is one of his best films. I mean, with Michael Caine and Nancy
There's
Allen.
Not a lot of bad De Palma.
What?
Well,
there's not a lot of bad De Palma.
There's not a lot of bad. Yeah.
There's not a lot. There it exists. Okay?
Yeah. The Black Dahlia. Yeah, that's bad De Palma.
But then we got Carlito's Way,
I love Carlito's Way.
Exactly.
Carlito's Way is underrated.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm happy to own the Criterion version of Dress to Kill. That's one of my favorites. And another one I wanted to bring up, which I feel is one of the most underrated of the 70s, I know Lorne would respectfully disagree with me on this one, but look.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, I know. Look, I am a massive Shirley MacLaine fan, and I am not ashamed to say that. She only made one horror film in her entire life, and despite the fact that she was, and Lauren, if correct me if I'm wrong, she was William Peter Blatty's neighbor and the inspiration for the character of Chris McNeil in The Exorcist, but she passed on it to do this movie called The Possession of Joel Delaney, based on a book by Ramona Stewart, where she plays an upper class lady who has a weird relationship with her brother Joel, which like at the opening party sequence, like they look like they're actually lovers, but they're in fact their brother and sister. Well, apparently this serial killer from Spanish Harlem is now possessing her brother, and it becomes kind of this battle as to who's going to be ultimately have possession of the brother. And it's a very controversial finale involving two minors. A young girl is forced to eat dog food, and the young boy is forced to strip naked and do a little dance for the killer. And of course, this movie got completely overshadowed by The Exorcist. But look, I would tell people, if you're looking for something that's a little bit more risky from that era, a little bit more interesting from that era. I mean, there were layers to this, which I could not shake off. I mean, there's not really any gore, but like I said, as far as New York horror is concerned, this really captures what the early 70s in New York was really, really like. I mean, the library sequence alone, Shirley MacLaine is shot among real library patrons when she's walking around Spanish Harlem. That was all done for real in the middle of New York during broad daylight hours. And the voodoo sequence. Voodoo has never worked for me in movies. I do intend to give Lauren's recommendation of House on Skull Mountain another chance. I will. This voodoo sequence in Possession of Joel Delaney tripped me the fuck out. And I can't say that about voodoo in movies, but yeah, this one did it. And last but not least, very rare copy. There's 12 copies left at Via Vision in Australia. Go ahead and order one. But I love it. I love The Possession of Joel Delaney. Yeah.
I have very mixed feelings on that film. But, Stone, one little caveat.
Yeah.
Shirley MacLaine was in the TV movie Salem Witch Trials, which I would say is at least horror adjacent. But other than that,
thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. Worth watching, by the way. Worth watching.
Yeah, very she has to be stripped nude and do some pretty wild stuff in that movie.
Oh, I gotta check it.
Yeah. Well, if you want to see it,
who needs Mr. Skin when you got Dan Schein?
There you go. It's not always pleasant, but yes.
Can you give us the time marker when that happens, Dan?
1 hour, 21 minutes, 7 seconds.
Someone out there is going to fact check that shit. You know that, and you'll be like, "Well, I was going off a PAL copy, so that it might be off."
There you go. It could be off. But I'm glad you actually picked that one though, because it's not a movie that gets talked about a lot, and hopefully it'll get a wider Blu-ray release maybe here in the States and people get to discover it. But yeah, definitely not taking the Exorcist role though. Whew.
Yeah, well, the Exorcist was the book was very, very popular.
Yeah,
but there was a big fear that it couldn't be done. Like it's very hard for us to imagine now, but in 1972, as that film is prepping to be shot, 72, it's only 3 years removed from shit like Night of the Living Dead, right? There was no inclination that what was on the page could be put on a film and get legally released to the masses. We were in very, very early stages of realizing what was possible, and that was not the 70s we remember, the wild, free-falling 70s. That doesn't really start to 75, really. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I think, were very timid about getting into an adaptation of what was at the time considered a scary, transgressive novel. I can understand why she turned it down based on not being sure it could be made. But on the other hand, you know what? I'm glad where we landed. because I think The Exorcist is.
I
Well, I don't believe in perfect films. I think it's as good as we were ever going to get an adaptation of that novel. So we're good.
Yes.
No.
And we're going to come back to that as a theme later, I think, actually. Dan, any favorite New York or anything about the subject of New York horror? Actually, it doesn't have to be a title if you don't want.
Well, I've got a couple titles, but I do think when you talk New York, specifically 70s, early 80s era, it's a period in time that'll never come back. Not exactly. I mean, I know there's, New York's has had its ups and downs even lately, but it's a very specific time and a very specific mood. Just that dirty, depressing, poverty-ridden, dangerous New York.
Beautifully disgusting.
Beautifully disgusting, yes. Just the social unrest, it felt really dangerous.
It felt like a Ninja Turtle could pop up at any second.
It should.
That's not where I would have gone.
I would have gone.
Just saying that was the New York the Ninja Turtles were fighting to take down.
You are so young. It is stupid.
Well,
I'm really not young though. Here's the thing: you're just advanced, and I'm advanced along with you, just not quite as far.
Go back another 10 years. You have William Friedkin stripping down to his ass, just wearing like a. He had to get access to those leather bars by just wearing the leather outfit. Yeah. He was totally naked doing that.
Yeah, filming of that had to be interesting.
Have any of you cats ever seen the sort of fake documentary Mondo, New York?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Not. It's about the New York art scene in what, 87. So it's even late for what we're talking about, but it's if you love grimy New York, you need to see it. Do you want to see a real voodoo ritual? It's there. You want to see an entertainment whose part of his magic show is simply decapitating mice by biting off their heads for real? It's there. You want to see a practically pornographic striptease about Marilyn Monroe? It's there. Didn't MVP just release it? Dan?
Yeah, MVD, I think.
Yeah,
in the last few years. Yeah.
I've never seen a cleaned up copy. I have my VHS. I'm good. But it's if you love grimy New York, Mondo, New York is the title. To see the
I do recommend checking that out. But also, and it's been brought up in the chat already, probably one of 2 or 3 quintessential New York horror movies, The New York Ripper from Lucio Fulci.
Oh yes.
That one is banned in Britain until just a couple years ago.
Good Lord.
That's the reason we took the colonies, man, right there. We saw shit like that coming. We knew we weren't going to get New York. If we let it slide today, there's no New York Ripper in 200 years.
It is probably the one movie. I mean, I know fans of The Beyond, House by the Cemetery, Zombie, all wonderful films, that do think he went too far in this. Not specifically the violence. I mean, I think the diner scene where a woman gets towed. That's the only way I can put it. A man just shoves his toe inside a woman in the diner. You could just see the grease coming off of this movie. It is just so grimy, so nasty, and one of the most just downer endings of all time with the girl in the hospital.
Brutal.
Perfect. Just one of the great horror endings. And I know not everybody likes New York Ripper. It's nothing classy about the New York Ripper, but
it's a shitload of fun though.
It is. What an ending.
Mm-hmm.
What an ending. I mean, that left me just shaking.
Lucio Fulci, man. I get a lot of enjoyment out of anything.
Yeah, and it was originally going to be a Ruggiero Deodato film about a killer.
Can't imagine that.
It was a killer that suffered from accelerated aging. And it was like, oh, well, now the killer's young, now the killer's old. They couldn't figure it out. He kind of reused those ideas in Phantom of Death later, but yeah, it was originally Deodato. Not hard to see that. But man, in terms of just mood, the fact that, I mean, you could make a movie with a similar premise, but you could never recapture this tone ever. It is a movie that I think even 20, 30, 40 years from now, you still won't be able to duplicate it. It is a postcard from a very specific era of filmmaking. And if you haven't seen it and you don't mind some of the unpleasant sexual stuff that is in there, get on it immediately, because the ending alone, amazing. And it ranks pretty high for me. It's tough because Fulci in that era there's a lot of just bangers, but yeah.
Beautiful
Lots of eyes
out on that one, by the way.
Gorgeous. Yes, from Blue Underground. Much better, I think, job than they did on the zombie one, personally.
Oh yeah, that's barely an upgrade.
Yeah.
The problem, the zombie one. Well, we'll get to zombie in a minute. Sorry.
Nope. Yeah, I figured we probably somebody will segue into that, but yeah, no, just, I mean, the Donald Duck killer. This is just a really disturbing film. That, yeah.
Weirdly prophetic, because if you consider like the post Giuliani era to be kind of like the Mickey Mouse version of New York, it has a weird symmetry to what like the film is kind of saying. It's like you dig a deep enough hole, then you have to live in that deep enough hole. If you build enough tragedy into a world, into a city, then ultimately the city is going to be tragic to you.
It's interesting, and not to call out ages. I know you're the elder statesman on right
He's
now. So
senior.
You might have seen a bit of that New York. I think my first time in New York was like the early 90s, and I was a little kid. But
as was mine. Well, no, that's look. If spending any time doing anything like real in the city, yeah.
When did Giuliani stop and frisk the New York out of New York?
Right. I mean, it was a process. It didn't happen overnight. Around 94, 95, it starts to really turn. But I remember being in during the Dickens administration where he pissed off the mafia and the cops at the same time. So the mafia decided simply not to pick up trash, and the cops were like picketing outside of Gracie Manor at the same time. And so you'd walk. When I remember coming out of the PATH station onto this street level in New York, and there was a constant buzzing sound, almost electric, all around you. It was the flies around all the trash that was built up on the street. And that was probably the most New York has ever New Yorked. For me, anyway. But no, I didn't see the grand days. What you're thinking of in terms of films like New York Ripper or Maniac or
yeah.
New York Ripper. I want to say one thing about, which is the most beautiful thing about New York Ripper is the film grain. The rest of the movie's uglier than the film grain. And I think that's a beautiful statement. Like someone went out of their way to make a film that was going to make you want to take a shower afterward. And we say that a lot about movies. New York Ripper is one of the very few that really makes you feel that way.
It absolutely does. And if you haven't seen it, this is not just gore. I'm not talking, and the gore is great. You get the ocular trauma that you expect out of Lucio Fulci.
The ocular trauma.
Yeah, that still gets even
AKA bitch stabbed in the eye.
Or other places in this movie.
But again, I'm a broken record. I'm a huge Fulci fan. Everyone knows this if you followed this Regionfree for any amount of time. But there's always that thing that I think that the critics of Fulci never really understood, which is that all the eye trauma is intentional. He was always saying, you want to see something gross? Sure. Here's it right in your eye. Right? He was attacking the viewer. Yeah. He was pointing out the hypocrisy of what
it's painful to watch, so it worked.
And that's what he wanted to do. And like, to me, New York Ripper is very simple. The slasher explosion had happened. He was going, oh, you think that stuff is fun, do you? Let's take a look. And you can still have a different sort of fun with it, but you cannot watch those movies like you watch Slumber Party Massacre.
Oh, no, it's a completely different thing.
And it's more legitimate film thing. it's legitimate as film, but it was not viewed that way. And Fulci was looked at as basically horror pornography for the period he was making these films. And now he's looked at as a high artist working in the genre. And it's just sad because Argento always was given the benefit of the doubt. I felt like I remember him being covered in like the Village Voice and, you know, the things like that were like pro art, but Fulci never got that treatment in the day. Never. That's a much more recent thing. Maybe those Anchor Bay and then Blue Underground releases that actually sold really well made some people take a better look at it and say, well, wait a second. How come these things are charting at number 2 for the week? Like this is a stupid film that Roger Ebert reviewed twice negatively when it was released under 2 different titles. What did we miss? Because there is a lot to be missed. I think the core films, Zombie, House by the Cemetery, The Beyond, City of the Living Dead, New York Ripper. I think those, and I'll go back further. I think Beatrice Cenci, one on top of the other, is Perversion Story, whichever you do it as.
Lizard in a woman's skin.
Lizard in a woman's skin. Yeah. I think these are really, really, really important films for the genre. And then when his lesser films in that period are actually the softer ones, like The Psychic, says, I know that as 7 Notes, but like incredible run from an incredible artist. And it took a Lucio Fulci to be able to portray New York. It took an Italian to portray New York the way that we have it calcified in our mind now.
The Italians loved the city back then. A lot of Italian films set in New York, and please go out.
How are they getting those shots?
You couldn't now. Like right now, if I tried to just take a handheld camera and just film one actor, you will have people descend on you. There is no way. How he got those shots in Zombie, even then, blows my mind how he didn't have cops all over him to shut that down. I probably one of the most iconic shots in all of horror.
But it was one take. What do you want to bet? What do you want to bet that was one shot?
I guarantee that was a shove the camera back in the trunk and let's roll the car, not the camera.
Yeah, and that was a real shark and zombie, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh my god, dude! Don't get me started on that shark thing, dude. That is, oh my god! They just drugged a shark.
They drugged the shark.
They drugged the shark. And then
why couldn't Spielberg have done that?
Oh my god, that's, you know what, Spielberg didn't have the balls that
no, he didn't.
No.
Grapefruits on Fulci, this man.
Yeah, so Spielberg's like, why does the mechanical shark keep breaking down? Fulci's like, make sure it doesn't eat him. Besides that,
yes. How drugged can we get this shark before it dies? And I really don't care if it dies, if we kill the first one, figuring it out.
I love that they hired an actor to play the zombie role, and he backed out. He's like, wait, what? The shark trainer's down there like, okay, I'm going to do this.
That's how I sell that. That's how I get everyone to watch that movie. It's like there is a real fight between a zombie and a shark. It's a real shark, and it happens in frame. I shit you not. No, just watch the movie.
If you've never seen, have you seen Zombie on the big screen?
Yeah, unfortunately not, man.
That scene is even wilder if you can catch a
I can only imagine.
Of it. And try and catch a film screening of it, not a digital projection, if you absolutely can. Every once in a while, the Alamos do it, and maybe a small group like Exhumed in Philadelphia will still put it on every once in a while. Go. Just go.
Oh man, that's my all-time favorite zombie movie. Everybody else can take Dawn of the Dead and shove it.
Are we gonna do this? No, we're not gonna do this.
No, let's not.
That's the New York segment. We'll say that for Halloween episode. We'll get a little something for him.
You just feel like he was sitting there, and if the stuntman said anything, don't to be a pussy. That's about it.
No,
you think Lucio Fulci is Mario? I'm going to fight at the shark.
But it's so we have such a warped view because horror fans of Lucio Fulci, because this is a guy who started making films in the 1950s comedies and rock and roll films and some straight dramas, a lot of farces, a lot of military farces, a lot of political farces. And so for 30 years, he's making films that are like considered like screwball comedies, light, fluffy entertainment, kind of safe. And then he goes through this dark patch after his wife's suicide. Yeah. He makes these horror films. And the thing is, like, you could get people to do almost anything for this man because he'd been in the business for so long. He was super respected, but most people were thinking it was like for his like screwball sex comedies. And you show up and you're like, you're gonna go in the water with the shark now.
I'm sorry, do what now? What? It's a fine. We drug a shark.
You want me to break its fin for you?
Smacks the shark. It's fine.
And they're down there using real chum to simulate like the shark getting torn up. It's like, can't see how that can possibly go wrong
in the ocean.
So good.
This shark is underplaying. I want to get this
in before we move on. We did an Argento, like a whole segment for Argento. We need to do Fulci because we took a New York segment and did the long way around to gush about Fulci.
No,
I'm always down to do another Fulci episode. I basically did one of them for this channel years ago, but I'm down.
Oh, I want down too. We could just do a whole Fulci like episode.
Okay, guys in the chat, if you want a full Fulci episode, just scream it. Definitely. We got to move on though because we're way over time because Lucia just picked up a half hour that I didn't anticipate. But we might actually not be good.
Part 2.
We might be trending too far from it. So, is there a retired and or dead? I guess you'd have to be retired if you were dead. Maybe it's just retired or dead film director that works in the genre who you'd like one last film for. If you could resurrect someone to just make one last film, or if they're retired and just not coming back, who would that person be? I mean, we've lost so much talent in recent years, whether you're talking about your Stuart Gordons or your Toby Hoopers or whoever. We've lost a lot of talent. Who do we want one more film from to kind of maybe to right a wrong, or maybe just because we just want one last ride. And keep in mind, David Cronenberg is still alive.
I spent a considerable amount of time considering this, and I mean, of course, who wouldn't want to see another film from Fulci or Craven or, but Todd Browning. Man, I would like to see another one of his carnival horrors, especially after, because what's so sad is that Freaks is one of the most unsettling movies I've ever seen. It finally got a Criterion release, and sadly, he died right before Freaks had its resurrection in the 60s. And it became one of the biggest cult films of all time. And then it was subsequently banned in the United Kingdom for 30 years. But, I mean, I would love to see another Todd Browning movie. I mean, just what we saw with that Criterion set with the Mystic and everything. I mean, there was nobody else like Todd Browning back in the silent era and early talkies. Just nobody else like him. And, Freaks, what I wouldn't give to go back in time to see the original version of Freaks when it premiered in January of 32. Holy shit.
The audience.
Some pearl clutching going on, buddy.
I can't imagine the audience that saw that in that
filth.
Yeah.
Trash.
I can see people legitimately passing out during Freaks back then.
Oh, yeah.
And it's held up. It's held up really well. That movie's still
pornographic.
Yeah.
Well, good Lord.
No, I'm not sure it is. Freaks is amazing. Freaks is a miracle of a film. But Todd Browning's a great pick, Stone. I mean, obviously Dracula is what people know, but I mean, if you ask people what lost film would they most want resurrected, anyone, just about anyone is going to say London After Midnight. A Todd Browning film.
Yeah.
A film that had such a troubled history and he was so unsatisfied with it, he remade it himself in his lifetime to apparently less effect. But although people say London After Midnight was no Dracula to begin with, but at this point, we'd all kind of killed to see it anyway. So yeah, I mean, he's a really good choice. I think some of the later Browning stuff, kind of like The Devil Doll, or I don't know if any of you've seen that, or The 13th Chair, like those are films that show a lot of promise, but were all clearly held back by studio concerns, which he didn't have so much at the beginning of his career. So yeah, I'd be down for that. More Todd Browning is never a bad thing.
Todd Browning, A24 or Neon film,
Jesus.
like what that would look like would just be amazing. Just cast Willem Dafoe in all the roles.
Oh my God, yes.
Good pick, actually. He's one that I did consider. But I went with some. Now, you mentioned Cronenberg and I think most of us would agree, the most consistent genre director. Now, he's not strictly horror, in fairness, but most consistent of any of the horror masters. One that, while not having the record that Cronenberg had by any means, that I do think was making some fantastic films at the end of his life is Stuart Gordon. Specific. Well, and you know what? I know you're not a big Reanimator fan, but Edmund is a masterpiece. Edmund is a wonderful film. Stuck was excellent. He was somebody that I felt, for whatever reason, he couldn't get to that upper echelon. He deserved it, I think, a lot more than Wes Craven at the end, who's, still able to do studio films. He was, more in that indie realm. And I think Stuart Gordon, if he could have, A24 could have given him something, given him creative freedom to do what he really wanted to do, I feel like he could still be at the top of the game in terms of horror directors. Like I think he still had the passion that, let's be honest, guys like John Carpenter lost a long time ago. Not to take anything away from his films, I just don't think he particularly cared about the movies anymore. Stewart, again, Edmund, I feel like nobody's seen that movie, and it's a crime. You guys really need to check it out. Some of his stuff at that period was kind of horror adjacent, maybe not full on horror, but I mean, King of the Ants, he didn't have the biggest budgets, but he delivered every time.
Well, he cut his teeth without the big budgets too, whether it's Empire or New World or So I mean, working with Charlie Band, you learned how to save some money, right?
Yeah. Also responsible for arguably some of his best stuff. Pit and the Pendulum, some would say it's the best full moon movie. It certainly is in the conversation. So even back then, I mean, again, a big leap to where some of these other directors were at that time to Stuart Gordon making movies for Charles Band. But I do think the talent was there. More so than a Wes Craven, who I think is actually going to come up in a little while on another segment. But he would be my pick. And I really think people should not sleep on what he did towards the end of his career. So if you like Reanimator, I love Reanimator and From Beyond and all that good stuff. But please don't sleep on the latter half of his career, because it's a crime more people haven't seen those movies. I
consistently say that Dagon needs a lot more respect.
Dagon, absolutely.
Man, Dagon's fun.
Yeah.
It's also the most accurate Lovecraft adaptation.
But it's not Dagon, right?
It's not. It's Shadow over Innsmouth, but but as an adaptation of Shadow over Innsmouth, it's pretty damn close. I mean, the very ending goes big where Lovecraft story doesn't, but very minor concern. The rest of it is pretty much on point. Biggest problem there is that the leads are kind of not great. They're good to look at.
Yeah, I mean, atmosphere, I can forgive a lot for the excellent atmosphere in that. It just nails it. Better, again, as somebody who's familiar with the literature as well, a lot more so than Reanimator. Reanimator is its own thing, but it's not, you're better off going with Ivan Zucone or somebody like that if you want more faithful adaptations of those stories. But Dagon is another one that I feel like if it came out a little bit earlier, I think that was 2001, that would just be on everybody's top list up there with like Reanimator and some of those other films. It just kind of got lost in that sea of 2000s horror.
Definitely. Jonathan, do you have a director you wish you'd make undead for one film?
I do. I would like to unalive Toby Hooper, please.
Even after Jin.
Here's the thing, okay? So I don't think he misses from 74 to 86.
That's fair.
Well, they're watchable. Everything there is like at least a cult hit.
Absolutely watchable.
Yeah. I mean,
if not admirable, even if you don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a list up over here just to like double check, but like all that's good with me. And then just the Mangler, yeah. What's the most notable? He does Jin. Mortuary was the last one I watched. I'm saying he never got he got nothing. He didn't get to make money off of his name like Wes Craven did with like the Wes Craven Presents stuff, and John Carpenter now just being like, cool, I'm just going to make money on this. Like, he never even got to do that. So either A, I would like him to come back and make, something worthwhile, or B, at least would have liked to have seen him made some money.
Let me ask you a question, Jonathan, because Toby Hooper was originally the director attached to Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
Is that something you wish had happened in 85?
No. And just because like that, I don't know if he could have got that cool punk vibe.
It would have been a different movie.
Yeah. So I like Return of the Living Dead so much, like as its own thing. I'm sure it would have been a great movie and we probably would have loved it. I mean, obviously it would have been a big deal. It's just, I wouldn't want that. I think Return of the Living Dead's like way too cool and it's its own thing.
Yeah, it might have been very good. I think Toby probably would have.
Yeah, I'm sure he would have done something cool.
That tone is just gone. If that was
one of the few Kentucky horror movies, man.
Yeah. If that wasn't Dan O'Bannon, everything changes. That exact sense of humor. And by the way, Dirk, Mario Bava. I feel like I've hit my quota for putting him over because I almost chose him, but I was like, nah, let's show Stewart some love. But yeah, no, Return of the Living Dead would not be the same film. The humor wouldn't be there.
No.
And I don't know that it would have been a cult classic like it is now.
I mean, Return of the Living Dead 2 is pretty much Return of the Living Dead, and it's not the same, right? Like,
yeah. You would have had some cool zombie shit. It just the humor.
Absolutely. I'd like to, that'd be cool. Like if we could just peek into that alternate universe for a moment, get a copy of that. That'd be cool.
And the other thing is, a couple years after that, Hooper fails to get another project off the ground that I think we all look back, and that was he approached Canon about a Godzilla film.
Oh.
And the Toby Hooper Godzilla film, I'm sorry, that's something I can't even imagine in my head. So I want to see it. Imagine Life Force era Toby Hooper making a Godzilla film.
Ooh.
And you start to get all kinds of fever dreams about that.
What kind of drugs do you think he was doing around that time?
They're called all of them.
Dr. Pepper.
All of them?
All of them.
I've got a better pitch.
Space vampires.
Oh, better pitch. King Kong with Matilda May in the lead.
She's still naked as much as she is in Life Force for no reason.
I would destroy an entire.
It's not no reason. I
her.
think during the casting of the role, they looked at the actress getting the role and they said, "Okay, we need to rewrite some stuff because."
Dude,
listen, if we fuck up everything else in this movie, we'll have done one thing right.
Yeah.
My relationship with Life Force is walking through the living room while my dad and my uncle were watching it sometime in the 90s on like HBO or something, and being like shooed out and seeing Matilda May on screen and like holding on to that memory and being like, find this movie when you have the opportunity to figure out what this is.
Yeah.
It took more than a decade, but you know what? I found it.
People forget how weird the rest of Life Force is because she's such a big presence. Like that movie goes crazy. The helicopter sequence in that film,
Yeah.
No one but who Toby Hooper was directing that scene. Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, the fact that space vampires isn't the first thing that comes up when describing the movie should tell you how distracting she is.
Yeah. I get a weird answer for this question because it's a director who directed 2 movies, but they're both such important films to me, and I think are actually some of the best cinema ever created, especially in the genre. But I really wish that some studio had put the money down and let William Peter Blatty make a 3rd film. The Ninth Configuration is probably the most thoughtful film about mental illness ever made.
Very good.
And Exorcist 3, or Legion, as it should be titled, is simply a great artist figuring out how to transfer his greatest work from one medium to the other and succeeding so wildly that it would take 20 years for everyone to finally say aloud what they were already thinking, which is that this might be as good a film as the original. Which was heresy for so many years that even though on private conversation, one-on-one, I'd hear it all the time, but you couldn't get people in mass to say it. And you're starting to hear it pretty loud and clear from people now. I don't want to name drop here, but I mean, I one of the first voices that I encountered to say that, because I was saying it, was writer Brian Keane, who it is his favorite film. And it impacts the people it impacts at a very, very, very deep level. This is a guy who needed to make a 3rd movie. It is a crime that we will never have more than 2 William Peter Blatty films.
Yeah. Ninth Configuration is a one that shockingly, it feels like nobody's ever seen when I ask them still, even with the Blu-ray out. And it's not that it's not reviewed well. It's just, I feel like nobody's gone to see it or picked it up. And I don't know where the block is with that movie. Because it does belong, in the higher rankings of horror films. Certainly one of the best ones you've never heard of if you're watching this show.
So on my channel, there's that blurb that comes up of defining the horror genre.
Yeah.
And it's like Ninth Configuration is why that blurb exists in many reasons, because it is a horror film, because its intent is to disturb you. The intent is to get under your skin. But it does most of that through comedy, which is such an unusual choice. The movie is pretty much just funny until it's not. And then everything they built up in the previous hour and 10 minutes all gets paid off in a deeply, deeply unsettling way. And if you're following the film for its ideas, you can spend weeks, just weeks on that movie. It is brilliant in a way that we don't get brilliant every day.
Yeah.
Or every week or every year or every decade.
Do you think Exorcist 3 suffers from Exorcist 2 being so terrible? And people just assuming that, like, there's no way the 3rd one's better than that, right?
They were just done after the locusts. It was just like the grass.
The heretic.
I think people do bunch that one in, unfortunately, because I mean, what an awful fucking movie sandwiched in between gold. I
it's cool. They look into the shit too, though. So
I often wonder what it would have looked like if Exorcist 3 came out before 2, and 2 just didn't exist.
2 wouldn't exist then, though. I think that the only way that the Heretic exists is if Hollywood and all their greed go out of their mind trying to make a film that out exorcists Exorcist, which is what ultimately happened with Heretic. It's like, let's go big. And big wasn't the answer. Like, Exorcist is scary because it's a traumatized little girl in a bedroom. You don't have to go big. Stop with the globe-trotting nonsense. Stop with the fucking science fiction dream machines. Don't do any of that. And Blatty didn't. Like, when Blatty returns to the material, he's like, okay, how would Kinderman actually deal with what he saw in the first film?
Yeah.
That's the jump-off point. That the embittered old cop, how does he deal with, like, street crime that seems demonic?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It doesn't have to be. It's the same thing we talk about some of these Marvel films where it has to be like the entire world hangs in the balance. It's like just give me a more intimate, small story with great characters, it works. You don't have to go big like that, because big sometimes is fucking boring.
And it's like, obviously, besides the 2 films that Blatty had involvement in, the rest of the Exorcist series is garbage. When they tried to do prequels, what they learned is that everything that needed to be said about Father Merrin was said in his 19 minutes of screen time in the first film.
Yeah.
You could fleshing it out wasn't irrelevant. It was just you had nothing more to add. It was very much the Star Wars problem, right? 3 films is all you need from Star Wars. I think most of us have realized now. Everything that was going to be cool about Star Wars ever was done before 85.
They got a lot of mileage out of like colorful light sticks, man. They really did.
It's fucking abysmal. But and to do The Exorcist now with Blatty no longer around, I was always skeptical of Believer, and then I started hearing really bad things, and then the bad things didn't go far enough when I saw the film. And he was an exceptional talent. And while I think there's equal talents out there in the world, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying he was the best that's ever lived. He's definitely in the conversation of the most accomplished from vision to actually what we consumed. And the fact that he was so meticulous in writing the screenplay for the first film and actually writing and directing 3 or Legion. I don't know that there's an artist that really lives up to that quite as well, because even your John Carpenters love Carp, right? But does Prince of Darkness really live up to its how much we want to love that movie? Does they live? Do they really? Are we being honest? Compared to something like Exorcist 3, where every scene is honestly as close to perfect as film gets? I'm not sure. Now, you could say The Thing is a better comparison. Cool. I'm cool with that too. But for my money, like, you're comparing someone who had made several films and been through the experience. John Carpenter had built up, 10 years of experience by the time there, almost?
Yeah.
If you count the TV stuff?
Yeah.
Blatty made 2 movies. And he had been around the process and everything, but this was his second movie. And in my opinion, like, both of his films are classics, but one is undeniably a classic. Fifth Element, some people are just not going to get. I get it. But Exorcist 3 is as good as the genre gets. I feel.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's just sandwiched in between a lot of shit, and it came before and after, and that's the problem with it. People just is that the one? Is that the one with Richard Burton looking like he's about to pass out any second? And
Richard Burton's not even the problem with Heretic. You know what? He's awful because of where he was in life, but he's not the problem with that movie.
It's the octagons that they keep on pushing in the background of the hospital.
Oh my God. I just don't understand how you're making a sequel to the biggest horror film of all time at that point. Unquestionably in the modern era. You'd have to compare, when you're talking about the impact The Exorcist made, you'd have to compare it with Dracula or Frankenstein or Psycho. Those are the only comparisons before it. So it's a film of that import to a specific genre. You get shit like the scene where, like, the demonic Reagan is whispering in normal Reagan's ear, "Hey, what you do?" And you're like, it's a cartoon. It's ridiculous. It's just plain stupid. I can't believe anyone wrote it. I can't believe anyone filmed it and didn't realize how bad what they were creating. During the editing process, no one was like, guys, this doesn't work. We got to figure something out. I mean, maybe they were just too far along, but I cannot believe the movie got released and then pulled and re-released to try to fix it, which only made matters worse. It's a disaster. Heretic is probably, besides Believer, because I think Believer may have surpassed it in the "oh my God, this is bad" category. And I know that's controversial, but at least I can see an attempt to do something with the Heretic. It's really bad, doesn't land. Believer does nothing except modern, like, moral tropes, which fuck that.
Look, I know Heretic is a low bar, but I'd rather watch Heretic than Believer or either of the Rennie Harlan, Paul Schrader prequel versions.
I would like to watch the Paul Schrader film and not fall asleep.
I saw those movies one time. I mean, I remember who's in them, but I couldn't tell you anything about those movies.
One time.
No.
That was a 2 for the price of 1 deal, wasn't it?
Yeah,
no, that was 2 for the price of 8.
Of 1. Yeah.
There's 2 for the price of 8.
Oh, good Lord, those were horrible.
With the intent to make 1.
I mean, at least Exodus 2 has Linda Blair looking hot, okay? At least it has that.
It has Linda Blair coked up on...
yeah.
all that Hell's Angels money that she was running.
Yeah.
That film has a tap dancing scene in it for no reason.
No reason.
Nope. Except they wanted her in a sequined top hat.
Yep.
So
you won't show your boobs, but god damn it, you're gonna tap dance for us.
Well, 2 years later, that wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Savage Streets, baby. Oh.
All right, so let's all agree that all those folks needs to come back and make one more film.
Yes. One last one.
All right, let's piss off the audience. So imagine a world looks a lot like our world, where in the 1990s, during the drought, a different film came out that was not called Scream. And that film revitalized horror and set the tone of a new generation of horror films that didn't look like Gap commercials and didn't star television actresses in their 20s. What would you guys choose as that film?
So the easy answer to this is Candyman, as far as what was positioned to do. I'm not taking Candyman. I figured one of you would. So, and it's a good pick for reasons I'm sure you will talk about. But for me, the 90s is strange because I'm picking something that really had no chance to do it. And it's something that a lot of people, quite frankly, didn't really even see till later because there was a lot of distribution issues with this one. But I'm choosing the 1993 or 94, depending who you're going by, film Dark Waters from director Mariano Beno. One thing that is very unique about this, especially watching it now, and you can get it on that All the Haunts set from Severin, the full car set, which I highly recommend. There's a lot of great stuff on there. But this was shot in Crimea, in Ukraine. So, hotbed right now with the war. It is not a perfect film. There were a lot of production issues. The director himself is not entirely happy with what he did. But when I look at the 90s, Gothic horror is something that is not a big part of it. Anything you did get would have been direct to video and in very, very short supply. You had the Anne Rice stuff and all that, but generally speaking, you didn't get a lot of this. And just from the beautiful set that they built on the Crimean beach, having to move. I mean, this movie was a rough shoot because they had to move production to Kyiv, right near Chernobyl. And the lead actress was told she might not be able to have kids because this area made you barren. So,
Jesus.
Yeah,
Where?
no. Watch the special features on this. Louise Salters, the actress's name, and she did have 2 kids after this. So she said, fortunately, that wasn't the case. But you're getting a glimpse into something. Horror for me, mood and just the atmosphere is so much, and we lose so much of that in the 90s where everything just looks like a WB TV series. Some of that I do enjoy, don't get me wrong. I like some of the schlock and stuff like that we got in the 90s, but Mood was something that a lot of filmmakers just forgot all about. And my God, is Dark Waters, which was also released as Dead Waters. Like I said, this had a very troubled production, troubled distribution history. But if you like sort of nunsploitation, if you like just the great Italian horror that we were talking about previously, there are shots in here and that rival even some of that. I genuinely love it. It's just visually, I think, a masterpiece, and it's built up somewhat of a fan base, but I still feel that it's not where it should be. It's one of the best horror movies of the 80s, the 90s, pardon me, and I don't know why it hasn't been embraced a little bit more. So I wanted to pick that one. Dead of Night was another slasher film I was going to go with.
The British film?
What was the alternate title? Was it
The
just
Lighthouse?
Lighthouse?
I love that movie. I love that movie so much.
Yeah, another one that's
way
not
better
even
slasher
on
film
Blu-ray.
than Scream ever could be.
Better slasher film than anything in the Scream wave. It really, and that one also had just that's again mood and atmosphere. People forget about that. I mean, but
I love that movie.
Dark Waters, or you might find it as Dead Waters, and Dead of Night. That DVD is out of print and hard to find. I don't know why somebody hasn't tried to put that out on Blu-ray. That is something that we really should be.
I'm sure there's some places online that could hook you up.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's ways to see it, but we should be more focused on that than the 10th edition of, Friday the 13th 5. Some of this stuff is going to be gone, and nobody's going to be able to experience it. So, two recommendations. I cheated.
Stone, you got something from the drought years?
Well, it's kind of surprising to me because, of course, the 90s, it was the only decade in history where we had a horror film win Best Picture, and that, of course, was Silence of the Lambs. It's kind of amazing that we didn't have a lot of, aside from Seven, and maybe to a lesser extent Copycat with Sigourney Weaver, that there weren't a whole lot of, late in the decade, we had those crappy direct-to-video ones like Ed Gein or whatever. Like, I never watched any of those. But it just seemed like after Silence of the Lambs and Seven that we would have had more of those, very complex mystery horror films involving serial killers and their, eccentricities and fetishes and everything. And just, there weren't a ton of them. At least I don't remember. I mean, I thought those two films, I mean, and even to a lesser extent, Alien 3, with David Fincher's first film.
What do you mean a lesser extent?
Well, I like it lesser than Seven.
That's just confusing.
That's just confusing. Okay. Well, I honorable mention. Now, I mean, just, or, these old-fashioned haunted house movies, which, were resurrected in the 90s, like House on Haunted Hill. Those might have been good ideas, but in the 90s, it just seemed like after Scream, everything had to be, just another slasher clone of Scream or I Know What You Did Last Summer and Urban Legend. Why didn't we get more movies like Seven? Which was exploded at the box office. It made like $350 million and shit. I just thought we would have had a lot more movies like that, which, actually had, literary themes and, influence modern day horror in that aspect. I don't know. Maybe I'm lost on this, but those are the ones I was thinking of for this.
Stone, we got to talk later. Because
yeah, I know. Did I screw up?
No. I got a film for you. That's my pick, but I want Jonathan to go first.
Oh, well, Dan said mine earlier with Candyman. And I don't view the 90s as a drought so much because I was into a ton of the like straight to video stuff. Full Moon, catch a random Puppet Master here and there. That was really my introduction into horror in the 90s. Was all that direct to video
Full
stuff.
Moon was a godsend.
Your Dr. Giggleses of the world, Dr. Giggle Eye, if you will.
I think it is definitely a matter of your perspective.
Oh, it's nostalgia, 1,000,000% for me. I acknowledge that.
There was a lot of direct-to-video horror, but that was at the time viewed very differently than it is today. Today, everything is streaming within 30 days of being in a movie theater screen. It's very hard to have like different categories.
Yeah,
we're clinging to categories, sort of, but it's different. I mean, when you have day and date to go see Godzilla versus Kong in the theater or on Peacock, was it Peacock? It was some fucking place.
Max, I think.
Max. Then it's tough. It's tough to have that same differential. But it used to be when the stuff you rent that was original to the video store was thought of differently. It was thought of kind of like the TV movies of their era.
Oh, for sure.
So the horror drought really was about theatrical horror, but it was also about theater of a certain or not. I don't want to make it about budget because it's not really about budget, but it is about a certain level of production. Whereas those Full Moon films, I mean, you're talking about 4 locations, 5 actors. You're talking about reusing score elements. It was not the Roger Corman thing, which was low budget, but those low budgets, every penny was on screen somewhere. In fact, I would say something like the Corman Poe adaptations were made for way less money than you think they were, and they look as good as anything made in their era.
Better.
That you can't say that about the direct-to-video era of horror in the 90s. So I think it was just a different category. And I think people also think that when I talk about, or anyone talks about the drought years, they tend to think that we're saying that everything that came out was bad and that we're insulting films that they liked. And that's not what is. Horror has gone through one of its most successful periods ever in the 1980s and one of its least successful financially and from a cultural standpoint in the 90s.
There was less of it, and that's undeniable. There was less horror. Like, go and look at lists of horror movies in the 80s or horror movies in
70s.
the 2000s, 70s, 2000s, any other era. There was a lot less in the 90s.
What I was going to say about Candyman is, like, I think Candyman could have started something, but it was marketed in an outdated fashion. They tried to fit it into a box that nobody wanted anymore, really. They tried to make it a franchise. There shouldn't have been a sequel to that movie, let alone the terrible sequels those movies had. It should have been like an A24 thing, just a nice standalone movie. That movie's a lot more thought-provoking and deeper than even people who say that movie is thought-provoking understand.
Great.
Many different things going beyond racism in that movie, which is the one thing you hear about.
I would argue the movie's not about racism at all.
Yeah, that's the one thing you hear the most about is, since there's so much more than that going on.
It's set in a predominantly African-American slum, and that's the only thing that's actually. I mean, yeah, you're gonna see all the social problems that exist because it's part of that world, but it's just the setting. But people focus on that, and that's unfortunate because they miss what the movie's about, which the movie tells you several times.
It's just a case of people going into a movie expecting or being told they were going to get one thing pretty much and getting another, or they were told to expect something. And in many ways, the audience twisted that movie into fitting their narrative instead of what's actually on screen.
Well, they tell you, and spoiler alert, there is no Candyman.
No, she's nuts.
And your Madsen. Yeah. It's not ambiguous. It's they tell you, like, it's there.
Which always also freaked me out because, like, when Hot Tension did the unreliable narrator thing, people hate that movie because of the twist. Well, Candyman has the same twist.
People hate that twist, and I thought that was like the selling point for Hot Tension.
I mean, I love the twist, but
I did too. That's why I love the movie.
Most people have a big problem.
Because didn't we like have I think it was an off-air discussion, but like I think I asked you guys, how would you feel about High Tension if you took the twist ending out and just played it as a slasher? Like, how do you feel about that movie?
It'd be a competent slasher, but it wouldn't be what the movie is.
No, I'm just saying you could play it that way, and I think it would work.
So I mean, the thing is with unreliable narrators, there's two ways to go about it. Either you beat the audience over the head about it, or you put all the clues in place. Candyman kind of does both, which is interesting because it literally writes the answer on a wall, but it also, and a character literally tells her that it was always her. But on the other hand, the story doesn't give us that moment where a psychiatrist is standing behind a desk going, and that's how Helen went insane. Which literally, I mean,
the camera pulling back from the psychiatrist's face.
Well, you laugh, but I could see a Blumhouse film ending that way. I really could. Psycho ends that way.
Yeah, Bloom would have to like beat you over the head in case you didn't understand what was going on here.
there'd be an asterisk and a footnote in the film.
Yeah, you would have had
actually say asterisk out loud. They would say footnote.
Yeah, no, I avoided saying Candyman, although I think Candyman is legitimately the best horror film of the 1990s.
It was positioned to do it, though. That's the thing. Like, Dark Waters didn't have the distribution.
No. And the film I'm going to talk about doesn't either. But the thing about Candyman is Candyman suffered because we just had gotten through this 5 or 6 years of silly horror being what sold.
Yeah.
It was the Freddy effect. And it was always, we have to have a bunch of jokes after gore scenes. And that's what horror is for like 5 or 6 years. That's pretty much the template that almost everything had. Gone were the days of The Shining, right? That was not even on the cards. Instead, we were getting, Freddy putting on sunglasses and saying something about suntan lotion. And if you love that stuff, that's fine. But you got to understand that that's not what Candyman is at all. And people walked in thinking they were going to get something along those lines, and they get a film about, a woman coming unglued because of the expectations she's putting on herself because of society, and not at all what they were expecting. They kind of still cling to, this might be a supernatural slasher if I squint real hard, so I'll defend it as such, but it never really had the chance to inform the genre the way it should have. So that's not where I went. So Stone, so you said a serial killer film with some much deeper meaning than it's given credit for?
Yeah.
How about the Lamberto Bava film Body Puzzle?
Oh, good pick.
Never heard of it.
Body Puzzle was released in Europe in 92. Doesn't come out here until December, I believe, 93. Very limited theatrical run before it gets dumped onto VHS. Most people saw a horrifically cut version on VHS as it was originally released. You can find it uncut now, although it doesn't have some shiny deluxe edition like that it deserves. Really unusually relevant film. It really resonates. It makes you feel things that you're not ready to feel. And it's a very uncomfortable watch, and it's completely out of time. It's a film that could have come out 30 years earlier than it did, or could have come out today. It's not tied to the early 1990s the way you'd expect. I like it. In Bava's work, I think it really stands out too, because Bava did go through a period where he was trying to compete with the Freddy stuff. We're going to have a big latex head with some things, with a big eye. He did that shit. This was a correction on his point. And there was other films around this time, like Out of Darkness, if anyone has seen that. That kind of have a similar feel, but this feels more dangerous to me. So if you would like the younger Bava's work that is not called Demons, give this one a try if you can find it. You can find it. It's just whether you're going to find it looking nice or not is the question. I'm sure a quick Google search with maybe on the YouTube platform will probably give you it, or I believe Internet Archive have a version of it uploaded.
Don't sleep on the Internet Archive.
Do not.
It is just free, awesome stuff.
Do you want the cleanest possible print of Edison's Frankenstein to see one of the very first horror films? They have it.
Yeah. Just TV that is gone due to music rights,
absolutely.
just I've known about it for a while, but this last year with Jonathan and Chris and some of the guys, I was like, oh my God, they have HBO's Real Sex on there.
It's fun to just go on there and look around. Just open up what's been uploaded recently. Like, holy crap.
Hey, I don't think that's even legal.
Yeah, old aerobics videos.
Who really want the, like, besides like me and 12 other people, who's watching that copy of TGIF you recorded in 1997 with commercials, right? Like, who else is watching that?
It's true. Internet Archive is a great resource. If some of you are in circles with me where you know that every once in a while I'll find something that is not really available in its complete form, and I'll get very excited and I'll send out a link to people, and everyone but Dan does not click the link because they assume that Lorne just wants them to watch some crazy, weird European shit. But no, I mean, Internet Archive has been a really good resource for a lot of those things I find and send out. In fact, what was 2 months ago, I was searching desperately for a film from my youth that I couldn't remember, and Internet Archive ultimately saved my ass. It was mistitled, but it was there.
Yeah.
All right, so can we all agree though that all these choices would have led to a very different horror field that we have today than if Scream hadn't been the film? I don't have a problem with Scream existing necessarily, but what it did for so long, brutal.
Yeah.
To this day, we still have kind of that, I don't know, teen-friendly horror thing. I don't know. It's ugly.
I got a love for it too, though. I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying, but just I was almost like the exact right age for all of that. So like it worked.
You just like Jennifer Love Hewitt.
I do like Jennifer Love Hewitt.
Fair enough. I just wanted to kill the conversation before we talked about Jennifer Love Hewitt.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So, misremembered. Do any of you guys have those experiences where for years you believed a film to be something, and then when you revisit it, it's either markedly different, or you appreciate it where you didn't, or you now learn that you hated a movie that you once really thought was much better than it is, or maybe you just had a different experience entirely from viewing to viewing? I feel like we all have had that.
Oh yeah, yeah. We were talking earlier about The Exorcist 2 and 3 thing, and I think that's what happens to a lot of people, who aren't, maybe watching 20 horror films a week like I do, where you just kind of forget,
only 20, Dan.
Only 20 on a slow week. They saw 2, they got burned, and they just mentally kind of lumped it together. That happens to me sometimes too, for something that I didn't go back and watch. Somehow it just got lumped. I've talked a lot about certain films that you might mention, so I'm not going to go too deep into those, but I would throw out one that I thought was very clever, novel idea at the time. In the years since, meta horror doesn't work for me most of the time, but I revisited it years later, and New Nightmare. I used to think that was a good movie. That movie is boring, not a lot. I mean, okay, Heather Langenkamp's playing herself, and I think that's the issue. That was like a very novel thing at the time. Not completely original, but when I've watched that in recent years, I'm like, my God. I mean, it's not as bad as like a Freddy's Dead, or I think there's a lot of, honestly, people out there, some quiet, they're quiet for the most part, that revisit some of the Nightmare on Elm Streets and have similar feelings. But New Nightmare is just slow as molasses. It's not that compelling. Once you get over, it's like, oh, Robert Englund's playing himself. And,
well, it doesn't like you either, dickhead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not shitting on Freddy's Dead tonight.
Nico Hughes acted his little ass off in that film. And you're gonna just shit all over it.
All the respect in the world for Miko Hughes, but go back and watch it. It's not very good.
It's not, and that end nightmare sequence is cheap as fuck.
It is. It really.
There's a spiral slide in that movie where characters.
The big franchises were really kind of dying at that point. I mean, Halloween 6, I know some people like that, but everything was just getting cheaper. It didn't feel like they were putting the same kind of effort into it. And I don't know. New Nightmare to me, that's misremembered horror. I still love the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and I like 3, even though I was going down the wrong path. So I do like those 2 movies, but I think a lot of that franchise in general misremembered. And I'll throw out more if you guys don't take them, but that's one that really fit this discussion for me. Yeah. Sorry, guys.
No, I thought that was amazing. You guys got any you want to throw out?
I'm going the other way.
Oh.
I want to talk about some movies that, like, outside opinion and general consensus kind of affected my own opinion of. They were actually amazing movies. Like, the first one that comes to mind is the Hills Have Eyes remake, the Alexander Aja remake.
Ooh, yeah.
I remember just that taking all kinds of shit just because it was a Wes Craven movie. I do. On like the DVD talk forums and shit back in like 05.
I don't remember a time when people didn't love the Aja film.
Oh man, see, then he would get all kinds of shit because everything he did was always a remake after that, and it just kind of always pushed that one down lower.
It's a lot better than the original.
It's so much better than the original.
It's like God
I remember going and buying the original at Walmart when you could fucking do that.
Buying movies out in the wild.
Yeah. And you just go buy something like The Hills Have Eyes. The Anchor Bay release of that.
I do like Hills Have Eyes, by the way, the original, but the remake is superior.
I do as well. I mean, even comparing the original against similar films of its time, I don't know. Now, I'm not considering it a classic. The Hills Have Eyes remake versus what was coming out at that time or other remakes. That movie is fucking terrifying. When Ted Levine's eyes just go white when he's being burned to the RV scene, just everything. That movie's nightmare fuel.
When they crucify the dad and set him on fire, Jesus Christ, literally, Jesus Christ, they crucified this man.
Yeah. There were people that couldn't handle it.
Hillbilly cannibals, they were very, very angry.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man.
I remember sitting in a theater not being ready for that, man. I didn't see a trailer for that. Like a buddy asked me, he was like, let's go see this movie. And I love seeing it when oh my God. That film just kind of happened at me.
Yeah, when that teenager goes in expecting Blumhouse fluff and they get something like the Hills Have Eyes remake and it just rocks them to the core. I love seeing that. Now that can go both ways. Huh?
That sting throughout the film. Oh Jesus, man.
No. Yeah. Just because it's a remake doesn't necessarily mean it's not great, and that is great.
Yeah, and it's weird because it does always get mentioned in the best remakes of the era conversation, but it gets mentioned late always. It seems like it's like the one that takes the longest for people to come around and remember, and then they're like, oh yeah, definitely. But it's not that initial wave where people are like, oh, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre film or Dawn of the Dead is actually pretty damn good. Then it's like long pause, and someone says, Hills Have Eyes, and people go, oh yeah. So it's weird.
They go, oh yeah, it was in the Evil Dead in the background, the poster.
It certainly was. Stone, do you have a misremembered film?
I do. I know I saw it originally maybe a year or two after it came out, and I honestly just did not remember anything about it. But I also think I was also just too young to appreciate it. I saw it when I was 11 or 12, and being a hard R film, I think I just saw it too young to really just understand what the hell was going on. I ended up buying it on Blu-ray last year from Via Vision imprint, and watching it again, I was really shocked. And I it might be premature of me to say this, but I have seen it multiple times now, and you know, you might think the best horror movie of the 90s is Candyman or Scream or Seven or Silence of the Lambs. All those would be wonderful choices. I'm going to go with Adrian Lyne's Jacob's Ladder.
Ooh.
Oh shit! Yeah.
It is
just least over the line in the 90s horror.
You think so?
Well, I mean, it was what, February of 90?
90?
It was November of 1990.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
no, 1990. Yeah, November of 1990. It was the same year that
Bro,
Ghost came out. And
I
this
was
is from
made
the
in
same
the 80s and came
screenwriter.
out in the 90s. It's cool.
and this is from the same screenwriter as Ghost. Ghost made $500 million, won Oscars. This barely broke even at the box office with only $25 million. And I think it was a right pick for Misremembered, because I just don't think a lot of people actually remember it as a horror film necessarily. I think it's a terrifying psychological horror film in many ways. I mean, based on the short story An Occurrence at Owl Bridge by Ambrose Bierce. But it also really does capture what Vietnam veterans went through when they were subjected to experimental drugs, when they were, over there fighting and everything. This is all real stuff. I mean, and watching Jacob's Ladder now, I mean, and it's really weird because Tim Robbins is so good in this, but you know who also was good, and this was right before Home Alone, is Macaulay Culkin. Macaulay Culkin appears unbilled as Tim Robbins' son. And I was like, that may be the best performance I've ever seen from Macaulay Culkin. That was insane. But I love
that kid out everywhere during that time, so I'm not surprised.
I think Jacob's Ladder is really, really unique, and I also think it just doesn't get mentioned enough. But I think it's great. I think it's awesome. And yes, I do see Carnival of Souls in it now. I mean, I didn't think of Carnival of Souls when I saw it again last year, but okay, I see it now. But then again, I'm glad it does have that element. So
no, I listened. Occurrence at Owl Creek's Bridge is one of the seminal stories in film language. So we're gonna get it over and over, no question about it. I don't think there's I don't even think that's a sin. It's how well it's executed, and if it's not a cop out, right? And I don't think it is in Jacob's Ladder. I saw Jacob's Ladder at the Washington Twin Cinema in Washington, New Jersey, back in the day, and the audience was pretty freaked out. Back when audience still got freaked out about things and let you know by making sounds in theaters.
Oh, so much fun.
Not being tough guys, but making sounds, responding. I have two examples of misremembered horror. One of them is kind of what you guys have been talking about. The other one is completely a different take on it, and that's what I guess I should start with that one. When I saw Phantasm for the first time, I saw a televised version of Phantasm in, I don't know, 84-ish. And I was very, very sick with the flu. And you have to understand, at the time we're talking, I'm what, 8, 9 years old, something. I don't know. I'm young. I'm real young. And I see Phantasm, which is already a difficult film from a narrative standpoint for a lot of people, let alone a kid who's not really that experienced with kind of nonlinear narratives. But because I was so sick, and that film has a lot of tonal, and I mean that audio, a lot of tonal decisions. So there's hums and there's buzzes in that film to set tones. The weirdest thing happened is that I was really sick. I got done with the movie, kind of forgot about it for years, and then I saw it again right before Phantasm 2 had come out. And the film made me physically ill from the memory of the film. Because I had been so sick the first time I saw it. And for years, I avoided the original Phantasm. I'd watched Phantasm 2 endlessly because I love that movie.
Yeah.
I love the original as well now, but it took me years to get past the fact that the film would actually psychosomatically make me sick, which isn't the intent of the filmmaker. You can neither blame nor credit the filmmaker for that. But I had a really strong reaction to the original Phantasm for many, many, many years. But the film I misremember just because Lorne is defective is a film that I love now, but I remembered very different back in the day. And that's Let's Scare Jessica to Death.
Oh, good movie.
Now, just to be clear, I know Jessica's in the real world, and I don't want to scare any of them to death, just to be clear. But Let's Scare Jessica to Death is a odd film, no question about it. Lots of voiceover, much like actually Carnival of Souls, actually, except it's wispier and stranger. And as a kid, when I first saw the film, and I saw it in the middle of the day on television, and the television presentation of that movie is odd enough anyway, because you keep breaking tone for like McDonald's commercials and then going back to the girl going, and then the worst thing ever happened in a voice that just is haunting and echoey and weird. But for years, if you know the film, you know the ending on the boat, right? I swear to God, the first time I saw the film, that Jessica intentionally drowns herself after committing her murder, which is not in the movie. It's not there. Huh. I have the strongest visual memory to this day of that scene in my head. Now, clearly it came from somewhere else and I conflated it. I get it. I'm not claiming there's an alternative version that aired on, Philly 57 back in the day. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that for years, every time I watched the movie and that ending came up, I was like, where's the fucking scene? I thought it was a Jaws 2 situation with the underwater helicopter, but it wasn't. It doesn't exist. I'm defective. Still love the movie and I've grown to get past it. But I completely misremember the ending of that movie. 100%.
Yeah. That's interesting because, I've probably created, I don't have a good example though, but I'm sure I've created stuff when I was a little kid. Same way, your mind fills in the blanks. It's the old gore and Texas Chainsaw Massacre that wasn't there kind of thing. Like your mind created something awful.
So I
still look for it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Every time I watch it, I'm like, maybe I'll see it.
Yeah.
I remember there was I met a fan at a Fangoria Weekend of Horrors, and he was looking at a bootleg of Let's Scare Jessica to Death on DVD back in the day. And I was like, oh, I love that movie, but I misremember it. And I explained the ending that I remembered. And he's like, oh, you're remembering Woman in Black. And for years, I thought that was the explanation. But no, that movie doesn't end like I remember either. So yeah, it's just Lorne is defective and probably needs to be just put out of his misery. That's how that is. It's not really a Mandela effect, Living Ghost. But it's not too far from one either, is it? It's only my Mandela effect. Do you guys want to do one more topic, or are we done? What's going on?
Oh, I think we got what, Dracula?
Yeah. You want to do Dracula?
Time to squeeze this in.
Okay, be on your best behavior, guys. Okay, very simply, no flowery introduction. Favorite Dracula performance?
Ooh.
I'm already going to go ahead and
Oldman.
say this. This is you guys seen like 4 Dracula movies. I'm not able to speak on this, so please.
So, do we get to vote on what your choice is then?
Go for it. Gary Oldman's a good pick, though.
I vote that he thinks Chris Lee, just because I don't think Chris Lee's going to win. So I want at least someone to have said Chris
Also,
Lee.
good pick, though. Like there's not.
I mean, I think we can all agree Christopher Lee is probably the most definitive, the most intimidating, because he played the role so many times. And Jess Franco's Count Dracula, which I know there's mixed opinions. That's one of the faithful or more faithful adaptations of it. So I don't have much of an argument with Christopher Lee. I was going to talk briefly about some that don't get mentioned that should.
Nick Cage, yes.
Not.
Yes.
Oh, okay. You need to go. I'm sorry. Sorry that you're out of time. I have So Chris Lee is not my choice, by the way. I just love Chris Lee, and I just want to make sure he gets mentioned.
Yeah. I've got a couple.
I'll take honorary Christopher Lee. Cool. Stone's going to talk about Gary Oldman, so
I've got a few that just don't get talked about at all. So I won't spend a lot of time on
Frank Langella is also not going to get mentioned. But
Frank Langella is amazing.
I was about to mention Frank Langella as like
Jack Palance.
John Badham's 79 Dracula.
Oh. Dan Curtis, yeah.
I like that film. It made major changes to the source material, but I like that film a lot. So is that your choice, or?
I'm. You know what? I'll go with Frank Langella. I'll go with Frank Langella. Yeah, I like Frank.
That production is a good-looking film, shockingly good-looking film at times.
Oh yeah,
and
very good-looking movie. Oh yeah.
Again, I don't know. Horror fans just tend to have short memories on this stuff. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I mean, can we face facts? Like for iconic stature, like Lugosi's just the guy, right?
Well,
there's no way around that.
I mean, that's most of our first glimpses of Dracula. Not how he was described in the book
at all.
No, not at all. In fact, that's one thing that Jess Franco's Count Dracula, because older man, mustache. Christopher Lee looks more like, the Dracula in the literature in that film. But yeah, I mean, it's Bela fucking Lugosi. That's the face you're gonna most associate with it. But
dabbing everywhere.
But if we're talking about performance, not iconic stature, that's different, I think. Go ahead, Dan. Scream them out, man, because I feel like you're gonna hit on my guy. So
a lot of these that I'm gonna go over real quick are pretty faithful. Not exactly, but one that never gets talked about, and you can watch it on YouTube. There is a version up on YouTube, is the 1953 film Dracula in Istanbul, from director Mehmet Muhtar. Atif Kaptan plays Count Dracula. He's very good. This is actually based on the Bram Stoker novel, but also the 1928 novel by Ali Reza Saifi, I think is how you say his name. And I'm not going to even try and pronounce that novel, but you can look it up. But Dracula gets his fangs in this. There's no Renfield. Mina's a bit different.
Because Mina and Lucy's roles are really mangled.
They flip those a lot in other films, and it also is the first one to kind of directly Vlad the Impaler. He's got a hunchback servant that I guess is kind of supposed to be a Renfield-like character, but there's not the asylum backstory. And one thing that this also does, and I believe it was the first, Dracula giving the brides the baby to devour. It's, if you are a Dracula fan, again, you can watch this on YouTube. It's very, very good, and doesn't get mentioned at all because, again, Turkish film from the 50s. It's a harder sell. But I wanted to mention that, and I got two more I'll run over real quick. Francis Lederer, who played Dracula twice. He played Dracula in Return of Dracula from 1958. But he also, and that was a modern Dracula too, if you haven't seen that movie, but he also played him in the Night Gallery episode The Devil Is Not Mocked, where Dracula takes on Nazi soldiers who enter his castle with bloody results. It's a great portrayal. He got to do it twice. I know Francis Lederer is not exactly a household name, but watch both of those if you want a great performance. And my last one because again, nobody ever talks about it, so I want to throw it out there for you Dracula lovers. Louis Jourdan in the 1977 British TV movie Dracula, which I believe was also at least the first British film that had the baby scene. He's amazing. And he hits a lot of beats as far as the seductive side of Dracula, but also just scary motherfucker, as he should be. And those are just a few that I know maybe you haven't experienced. And if you watch this and, you know, you've watched all the Christopher Lee Draculas and certainly you've seen the Bela Lugosi, go check those out. They're amazing.
Yeah, Louis Jourdan is my choice. The BBC Two production from 1977. Yeah. You can watch it on Prime. Yeah. It's the only place it's really available. There's a DVD that's long out of print and is not coming back. It is nearly 3 hours in its original form. It was broken up into a couple different forms for international. In America, we got it on Masterpiece Theater, cut into thirds. And actually, that version manages to hit the 3 hour mark through a lot of scene repetition of previously on type stuff, which is how I encountered it. It's not really faithful, isn't really the word. Like, it's faithful, but expands and contracts where it needs to. But his performance is a great amalgam of many of the performances that we're familiar with. So you kind of get the Christopher Lee English gentleman. You also get the Lugosi monster, the old world, like European monster. And he kind of is seamless in that. Whereas the Oldman performance, I love Gary Oldman, but Oldman is used so sparingly in his own movie for Francis Ford Coppola's film that that performance feels choppy. I don't think it's any problem with Oldman's performance. It's how the film is assembled. Certainly scene to scene, he seems to be playing an almost different character, which I think if all the bridge work was there, he would be flow a lot nicer. And that's the BBC production's greatest asset, is it had the room to allow the character to be the Romanian count and allowed the character to be the newcomer to the nuke world. And by the end of the film, he's so well integrated that he feels like the problem of the modern world. And it thematically takes what the novel is kind of suggesting, but isn't in the novel, because the novel is epistolary. It's all letters. It's hard to really organically have themes work through in any pronounced sort of way anyway. And but this, because it streamlines the narrative in places and expands in other, allows the concept of this old world evil, this representation of like feudalism and the protector of serfdom and classism in the old Europe, to invade modern like enlightened England, on the verge of the Industrial Revolution and of psychology. And here comes this monster from the past. And this is the version that really does that the best, I think, of all the versions of the story. And I think Jordan's performance is just absolutely knowing about what the project should be. Whereas I think some other performances through the years, I don't want this to become like worst performances of Dracula, because that's a long list too. But sometimes you just feel like they think that it's just fangs and capes, and this is the opposite of that. So I really recommend, again, it's on Prime. Don't buy the overpriced DVD, because my understanding is we may be getting a release of it sooner rather than later.
I hope so.
In the meantime, the Prime version is standard def. It is window boxed, but it is complete. Be careful if you look for listings about showtimes on it. Probably I'm the only one here that's psychotic enough to do that. But you're going to get a bunch of different numbers because it has appeared in a bunch of different versions.
Yeah.
Hope that helps someone giving a shit about this movie.
Yeah, watch it this Halloween. Watch some of those that you probably haven't seen.
All right. Well, guys, you know what? We hit 2 hours in about 40 seconds or so. I want to thank you guys for coming on. This was episode 11 of Regionfree, which means we have one more episode to go for the season. The season finale will be next month on the 13th. Season 4 will premiere thereafter, perhaps with some changes, perhaps with some exciting news.
Yes.
It's been great to bring this back to life over the last year. And all I can promise you is that we're always going to keep the conversation interesting, and we're not going to be like every other fucking YouTube show about horror. That's the commitment.
Yes.
Anyone have any? Well, actually, no. Dan, what do you got coming up on Flesh Wound?
Oh, well, immediately after this, I will be talking the wrestling. The last couple Dark Side of the Ring episodes on Squared Circle Society. And then I think we're doing a Patreon video and watching some of Kruger's matches. So, yeah, come hang out with us at about a half hour from now, I believe.
Stone, what you got going on?
I'm just on Twitter and YouTube doing my thing. I mean, I should be doing more commentary soon, but I just been too busy with other stuff. But I will be getting back to it.
Tell the ladies they need to take a break and watch some damn movies.
Yes.
Jonathan, I think I know the answer, but go ahead.
I ain't nowhere.
You're going to be at the Full Moon Nashville Tattoo and Horror Convention with me, so that's horror news.
Oh, where's that going to be?
In
Nashville.
Oh, Nashville. Excuse me.
Yeah. I'm going to go get tattooed.
I got that at a convention.
Oh.
They're pretty highly priced at conventions. I thought it would be the
not if you go to the ugly guy table rather than the cute chick
ugly
table.
guy table. I'll try to remember that.
Yeah. No offense,
table.
because you did an amazing job, but you were an older dude in the room.
I mean, a really cute
Young
girl
chicks
did all this. She did a great job on it.
Yeah. Maybe we roll the dice and we pick each other's tattoos.
I should mention that I will not be at this convention.
You don't want that Nev Campbell back.
Dan, if you'll get tattooed, I'll let you pick something to put on me. I don't care. Just don't put it on my face.
I might. I will see. I will get a feel for it down there and see. I might.
It feels like sunburn being applied to you. It does not hurt. Just stop. Just do it.
Lena Romay,
It is like it's
female
the
vampire.
exactly what it feels like. It's like somebody has a sunburn gun and they're just raking it across you. It's really
You'll be
not that bad.
fine, I promise you. For myself, Visited by Voices went network a couple weeks ago. We've been introducing a ton of new shows from a bunch of different content providers. In the coming week, we have the next autopsy video by the end of the week. That is for Della Morte Della More. So if you want a deep cut into the storytelling of Della Morte Della More or Cemetery Man, I have that coming your way. It's everything you wanted to know about how that film is constructed. It's also an hour long of hearing me talk, so stock up on caffeine because you'll need it. Other than that, just follow me on Twitter. I never post anything, but if you follow me, I'll follow you back, maybe, perhaps, if you're nice. And other than that, we will be back in 1 month for more Region Free.
Awesome.
All right. Night, guys.
That was the same shit as the last time.
Well, you picked the last one, and they didn't like the last one.
You didn't like the last one? But you were laughing the whole time.
Yeah, because it was ridiculous.
Ridiculous? That's a classic.
I'm not really into all the weird cousin shit that was going on.
You lied to me.
You picked this one. You picked this one. Cousin shit.